Hello and welcome to another ARC review. The first ARC review of the year. Now this book is called An Insidious Inheritance by Amelie West, and I can't really remember where I applied for this one. Thought that it was in a Facebook group, but I can't actually find the post anymore. But I do know it wasn't through Book Sirens, Book Funnel, etc. because the ARC was emailed direct from the author. It's something I've signed up to and I can't remember where. So, let's read the blurb for it. Some secrets refuse to stay buried. Upstate New York, 1933. When Clara Dawson learns of her estranged father's death, she's relieved to close that chapter of her life for good. But as his only child, Clara unexpectedly inherits Hollowfield House, a remote inn at the edge of a small town that she didn't even know existed. Selling it could help her escape her mounting financial troubles, but first she must confront the chilling mysteries that haunt its halls. Arriving at Hollowfield, Clara is unnerved by eerie encounters that leave her questioning her sanity. A mysterious locket, an unsigned letter, and the apparition of a young woman who seems tied to the inn's dark history. As these unsettling incidents escalate, Clara begins to suspect that her father's death may not have been as straightforward as she was led to believe. Her search for answers draws her into the tangled web of the inn's haunted past, revealing a truth more sinister than she could have imagined. Someone, or something, is determined to keep the past buried, and they will stop at nothing to silence Clara before she uncovers the truth of Hollowfield House. For readers who crave historical fiction with romantic tension and gothic suspense, An Insidious Inheritance is a mystery that will keep you guessing until the last page. Now, first things first, this book came with an A4 page full of content warnings that, after I've finished the book, I feel really didn't need to be there. So, I'm going to read them out anyway. The following are included on page and experienced by or witnessed through the eyes of the protagonist. Consumption of alcohol, some scenes. Mild abuse of alcohol, minimal scenes. Then why put it? Homophobic attitudes, minimal scenes. There's no slurs used or hateful rhetoric by a secondary character. Violence, minimal scenes and no gore. Witnessing a violent act that leads to death. One scene, no gore. None of them, I feel, are content warnings at all. Especially given what's in the book. No. The following are included off-page but may be referenced or described throughout the novel. Childhood neglect and abuse is referenced throughout. It doesn't go that hard. Parental abandonment is referenced throughout. Domestic abuse is referenced throughout. Death of a parent is referenced throughout. Suicide of a parent is referenced throughout. Terminal illness of a family member is referenced throughout. Mental health struggles and mental distress referenced throughout includes negative and potentially offensive references to mental health asylums. It's mentioned that she sees these ghosts since she was a child, and her mother threatened her with if she told anybody, she would most likely be sent to a mental institution. I think it's mentioned twice. Murder and death referenced throughout. Well, duh, it's a horror. Alcoholism of a parent referenced in some scenes. Grooming of a teenage girl referenced in some scenes. It's not that deep. Accidental pregnancy referenced in some scenes. Pressured forced adoption referenced in minimal scenes. It's referenced in one single sentence in a conversation near the end. War and conscription referenced in some scenes. I don't even remember it being referenced. Death of a loved one in war referenced in minimal scenes. They better be minimal because I can't remember a thing. Infidelity referenced in minimal scenes. Most of them aren't content warnings to me. Death, gore, violence, rape, abuse, sexual... That stuff is content. That stuff is a normal content of a story. If you drink, there's affairs. Come on now. Are we really getting so soft that lot is content warning? That you need an A4 page of content warnings for this? It's not that deep. And the story is not that dark. So, let's get started with the main review. So, I think I've put up here, this is what the cover looks like. It is gorgeous. I love the cover art of this. The inn, Clara in front of it holding a lantern. It's dark, it's atmospheric, it's raining. It's perfect to set the tone of the book. Now, this is an ARC review, so there will be no spoilers. One could argue that the content warning list could give potential spoilers, given how much is listed on there, but I will try not to reference them, because really they're not content warnings. But, this being an ARC, there will be no spoilers, and it is a debut for the author, so I am going to give it a little bit more leeway than I would if this came from a well-established author. But it's a debut, so I tend to be a little bit more gentle. Now, this is promoted as a gothic historical mystery, and for me it was not historical, and it was certainly not gothic. A mystery, yes. It's definitely more a mystery ghost story than it is gothic historical fiction. It really didn't give me those gothic vibes that like the likes of Wuthering Heights or Jane Eyre give. This wasn't like that at all. And although it did begin with a quote from Wuthering Heights, after I finished the book and reread the quote at the beginning, it doesn't fit. The scene from Wuthering Heights fits the book, but that particular quote happens after the scene in Wuthering Heights. So the scene in Wuthering Heights where this quote is taken from is where, right at the beginning, where the guy, I can't remember his name, he goes to stay there and his bed is by the window and he hears scratching and sort of crying on the other side of the glass. And Heathcliff barges in, throws up the window and yells into the rain and the night for that, ghosts are supposed to haunt him. That's the quote that's used, whereas I think it would have been better to use a quote from earlier in that passage where Catherine is outside the window scratching to be let in. But that could just be the quote that the author likes. I personally didn't think it fit. Now, the first third of this book, I found it a slog to get through, unfortunately. What the characters are doing, it's just mundane, day-to-day stuff, and the narrative tends to be a little bit repetitive. And it takes about halfway through this book for Clara to get off her arse and actually start investigating the things that are going on around her, rather than just be at the mercy of whatever entities or people or whatevers are making her life a misery. Now, Clara, as I mentioned, she is our main character, and I didn't dislike her, but I didn't like her either. She was a bit too middle of the road, a bit bland and a bit, to be honest, a little bit boring. The decisions she makes in how she goes about stuff, just how she comes to her conclusions, is just really hard to follow. And her mood swings during conversations just gives me whiplash. Because one minute she'll be happy, then she'll say she won't trust them and they're to get out of her house. And then she's saying, oh yes, but I don't want to be alone, so come back and make me tea. It was just a little bit jarring. Although when she finally decides to get off her arse and start investigating this mystery that's all around her, she becomes a lot easier to read and a lot easier to spend time with. Which is good because she's all we've got. And then the story noticeably flows into its stride, and it becomes a riveting read for the last 50% of it. I do think, though, that it would have benefited a lot more being told in the first-person narrative rather than the third. So you are, as a reader, you're overlooking everything, and I think that it would have had more impact, especially Clara's first night in the inn, if it was told through first person, so that the reader could really, really feel the creepiness and Clara's mounting tension and mounting fear at what's in the house, rather than us just be told that's what happened. The first person, I think, lets the reader experience it a little bit more, rather than just being told this is what's happening on page. It is a debut, and I said I was going to be kind, but there are a few threads and plot devices which are left unanswered, and characteristics of certain characters which seem to be completely forgotten about. So, for example, at the beginning, in the first few pages, we are introduced to Clara and her best friend, Mabel. And Mabel is overbearing. She goes through her mail and reads all her letters. Even my best friend wouldn't do that, and we've known each other years. She worries for her like a mother hen and insists on Clara calling her the day after she gets to Hollowfield just to make sure that she's alright and hasn't been offed by the locals. But after Clara first goes to Hollowfield House, Mabel is never mentioned in the book again. There's the phone call to check in, and then there is just radio silence. There is nothing. She isn't even thought about. And considering everything that Clara ends up enduring during this book, surely her bestie would be there for her, especially near the end. Because she goes through the ringer, and for a best friend that is so overbearing in the first few chapters with her, for her to be just absent and forgotten about for the rest of the book. Now, I did like this book. I liked it. It was alright. I give it 3 stars because it wasn't awful, but it wasn't the best thing I've ever read either. It was good. And that's good. The ending was very satisfying, albeit over a little bit too quickly for my liking. And the villain was dealt with and just much too swiftly. I think that bit, given the tension that is wrote so well in the lead up to this, I think that could have been a little bit more tense, a little bit more building, and a little bit more drawn out for that ending. The reveal was a bit quick. And unfortunately, I did guess who the end villain was right at the beginning when they were first introduced. So the big reveal at the end of who it was, it really didn't hit for me because it was like, oh yeah, I know. And I don't want that from my mystery novels. But it is a debut, so the next one might get better. Because this book is the first in a series, so you know that this character is going to be alright even before you start this one. Which I think it's a bit of a giveaway to call a book at first in a series if you're going to have the stakes of something like this. I think it would have been a little bit more tense if it was a standalone, because you wouldn't know whether she made it out or not. Now, one of the things this book did really, really well is one of the main themes of this book is Clara's trauma and PTSD caused by her father, Al. And this is really, really well written. The way she acts, the way that she reacts to certain people, certain conversations, certain words, certain cadences of voice is all moulded from her father's treatment of her and her mother as she was growing up. Now, when those flashbacks happen throughout the story, it does come across as the traumatising subject matter that it is. It's not, like some airy-fairy dreamlike state. It does come across as serious, which is what it's supposed to be. One of the threads that I did like in reference to this is throughout the book, Clara only refers to him as Al and never as dad or father. She only calls him father in the rarest of necessities. Every time that she talks about him, thinks about him, says anything about him, it is always Al and never dad or parent. I thought that was a very nice touch, as was the subtle reactions of people who she's talking to or the people that are around her who then hear her call him by his name instead of his endearment. I thought that was a very nice touch. I would recommend this book to, if you're a fan of The Woman in Black, then this would probably work for you. I liked The Woman in Black. I didn't love it. And with this, I liked it, but I didn't love it. Because it does start off slow. It only finds its rhythm halfway through. Now, like I said, this is the first book in a series, but it didn't end on a cliffhanger and can be read as a standalone. Everything was pretty much well wrapped up at the end in a neat little bow. The plot was interesting when you got to the mystery and Clara asking questions of the people around her and who would interact with the inn and who was the comings, goings, the history, the disappearances, that stuff was very interesting. The backstories of some of these characters was intriguing, as well as the motives for causing them to do what they do. There is the subplot of romance. Clara does get a little bit of romance, but it really didn't land for me. It didn't. And I think it probably would have been better for it not to have romance, but for them to become firm friends and platonic partners in this investigation into this mystery. I think that would have been a lot more better than all these confusing wrapping up feelings for each other. There were too many long lingering looks that didn't go nowhere, and there was no chemistry. I felt no chemistry between these characters at all. So yeah, this arc got 3 stars just because it was straight. It had some good points. It had some really, really good points. And then it had some things that just didn't quite get me there. But yeah, this book comes out on the 28th of January. And when it does come out, I will be putting its Amazon link in the description down below. So if you're watching this after the 28th of January 2025, you can click on that and it'll take you straight to the buying page and you can see it for yourself. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below and keep reading.
The moonlight soft embrace, dark star sips with calm and grace. Wine flows like whispers, secrets told, in the night where dreams unfold. Lonely shadows dance with glee, eyes of amber, soul set free. Finds they weave a tale so grand, woven